Hi, this is New Time on Silkway TV channel. We introduce you with the most visible news and important events that happen throughout this week in Kazakhstan and Central Asia. More details on politics, economy, social and cultural life with opinions from the most recognizable experts of Kazakhstan and world. I'm Ainur Mangali, and this is what you'll see today. The Middle Eastern crisis has been a year since the October 7th tragic events. How has the world been coping with one of the biggest crises in the human history? Our reporters talk to the leading political experts, writers and witnesses to understand what will be a solution and when to expect it. Eurasian security. President Tokayev addressed this issue during a special conference in Astana. The term, which is used actively in political discourse, what is it about? Peaceful atom. Kazakh citizens will decide the fate of the first ever nuclear power plant in the country. Let us start from the official agenda. President of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, has called for a new positive agenda to help the international community resume constructive dialogue. Speaking earlier this week at the Conference on Sustainable Development and Security in the Eurasian region held in Astana, he highlighted the critical role of diplomacy in the face of unprecedented geopolitical instability. More on Kazakhstan's perspective on Eurasian security in the following report.
Diplomacy and a multi-vector approach – that's how President of Kazakhstan's message at the Conference on the Critical Global Issue of Eurasian Security can be summarized. The event in the capital brought together prominent Kazakh and Russian scholars, political analysts and diplomats. In their presence, the president emphasized that the international community is in dire need of easing tensions, and the concept of comprehensive and indivisible Eurasian security could serve as the foundation for building a multipolar and just world order.
Amid profound geopolitical and geo-economic shifts, global climate and demographic challenges, the threat of new pandemics, an escalating arms race and technological progress, strategic stability has become a priority for all of us. The conclusion is clear. The international community needs de-escalation and a new positive agenda to revive constructive dialogue.
The region undoubtedly faces security challenges, including issues such as preserving the Caspian Sea, combating religious fundamentalism, and the situation in Afghanistan, where discussions about stability of the regime must still be approached with caution. President Tokayev also touched on other topics, including education and reforms in Kazakhstan. He placed particular emphasis on the political reform limiting the presidential term, stressing that the president is nothing more than a top manager hired by the people. He also pointed out that this regulation does not exist in any other country of the so-called post-Soviet space.
In my view, a single 7-year presidential term is sufficient to implement an electoral platform and reforms, considering that the president is, after all, a public servant hired by the people. I am convinced that in our country, the rule of law and order must prevail.
Only when the rule of law and order prevails can a country successfully carry out reforms and attract investments, concluded the president. On the topic of cooperation in education, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, a graduate of the Russian MGIMO University, announced the opening of a branch of this institution in Kazakhstan. However, no specific dates or further details were provided. Daurena Sagulov, New Time.
Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kazakhstan Murat Nurtleo addressed the general debate at the 79th session of the UN General Assembly. In his speech, Nurtleo emphasized that the current session is taking place at a critical time when the global security system is on the verge of collapse. He reminded the Assembly of the need to implement the World Unity for Just Peace and Harmony initiative proposed by President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev during the previous UN General Assembly session. He also called for the active participation of middle powers in addressing global challenges.
The voice of middle powers and developing nations are vital in bridging divides and nurturing a more effective international security architecture. It is in this spirit that I invite all nations to embrace my country's initiative. Together, we can pave the way for a more harmonious and united world.
Additionally, last week, Murat Nurtleo met with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken during the UN General Assembly in the C5+1 format alongside Central Asian ministers. Nurtleo emphasized the region's focus on comprehensive solutions to both traditional and emerging threats. Antony Blinken, in turn, reaffirmed the United States' commitment to working with regional partners to find regional solutions to global challenges. Nearly 1 year has passed since the beginning of the latest escalation of conflict in Gaza. Israeli forces launched airstrikes and ground operations after Hamas and other armed groups attacked southern Israel on October 7th of 2023, killing 1,200 people and taking over 200 hostages. Now the conflict seems likely to escalate into a wider regional war. New Time reporter Balzhan Samigulina talked to former Israeli negotiator to Palestinians Daniel Levy and human rights activist Ashish Prashar to make analysis on the escalation of conflict throughout the year. Details in the explainer section.
Previous Israeli campaigns in Gaza lasted a few weeks at most, but this one appears to be a war with no endgame. According to the UN, more than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed as a result of Israel's ground and air operations. A further 95,000 people have been injured, and a quarter will require lifelong care following amputations and spinal injuries. All of Gaza's population of 2.1 million is now in need of humanitarian assistance, and more than 2 million of Palestinians, half of them children, are living without access to sufficient water, food, shelter and medical care. This has been compounded by the destruction of 60% of Kazakh structures due to fighting and bombardment, including civilian infrastructure such as schools, religion buildings and hospitals. Now let's stop at a timeline of key moments since the latest escalation in Gaza throughout the year. On October 7 last year, Hamas, which controlled the Gaza Strip since 2007, chose the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah to launch the deadliest attack on Jews since the Holocaust. Israeli officials said around 1,200 people were killed and more than 250 were kidnapped and taken into Gaza. The next day, Israel declared a war and announced a complete siege of Gaza, restricting all supplies, including electricity, food and fuel. By October 11, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, unpopular before October 7 and now accused of failing to protect the country, formed an emergency unity government with Benny guns and called up 3,000 and 60,000 reservists to direct the war.
66 בעד, 4 נגד. אני מוסיף גם את קולו של חבר הכנסת דרעי לפרוטוקול.
זוהי באמת מלחמה על הבית. והיא חייבת להסתיים בדבר אחד, בניצחון מוחלט. ובריסוק וחיסול החמאס, החמאס שהוא דאעש.
מתחייב כחבר הממשלה לשמור אמונים למדינת ישראל ולחוקיה.
The initial attacks lasted up to October 27, then Israel initiated a ground invasion of Gaza, despite US warnings about potential civilian casualties. Following this, on November 24, Israel and Hamas posed hostilities to facilitate a hostage for prisoners exchange, allowing for increased aid into Gaza. Eventually, the pause ended after 7 days. Each side said the other breached the deal. Daniel Levy, president of the US Middle East Project and the former Israeli negotiator Taba during Prime Minister Ehud Barak's leadership and Oslo B under Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, noted that a broader peace has not been on the agenda. While a ceasefire might have been considered, he emphasized that despite officials claiming parties will close to a deal, that simply wasn't the case, and as it wasn't a priority for the Israeli government.
Israel has achieved some military successes in Gaza, but it is not going to have what Netanyahu has talked about, which is a total victory, a total dismantling, destruction of Hamas. That doesn't happen. Hamas is a political movement, an armed resistance, and an idea. And it's an idea which is not unique to Palestinians or to this moment in history. Whenever a people lives under an occupation, a colonial oppression, doesn't have its rights, there's always going to be resistance, whether that is justifiable in some of its manifestations or not. So I think it's Netanyahu's insistence on trying to achieve a bar which cannot be reached.
For over 2 months, the situation kept dire, with over 20,000 deaths reported by Gaza's health ministry, including many women and children, amid continuous Israeli strikes and military operations. Humanitarian conditions have worsened, with hospitals overwhelmed and accusations of war crimes and human rights violations escalating. Then on January 11th, fears grew of a wider regional conflict transferring into so-called Red Sea crisis. The Houthis attacked commercial ships in the Red Sea, warning it would escalate operations during Ramadan in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. The British and American militaries in response bombed multiple sites in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. British political strategist and human rights activist Ashish Prashar added that Yemen desperately needs international aid.
And what people could do to support them is to make sure that the people of Yemen have all the resources they need while they get bombarded by Western planes every now and then. The rest of the world should be making sure that Yemen has all the aid it needs, all the food, medical supplies to survive this Western onslaught.
The situation in Gaza remained critical, with escalating violence in Rafah in May leading to significant civilian casualties, over 30,000 reported. That means around 1 in 20 in Gaza are considered to be dead or wounded, according to Gaza's health ministry. In the middle of July, Israel attacked Al-Mawasi, a crowded tent camp designated as a humanitarian zone housing people displaced by the war in Gaza. The strikes resulted in at least 39 Palestinian deaths, raising the overall toll to over 41,000. The situation in Gaza was escalating, including political realm, with countries like Ireland and Spain moving closer to recognizing a Palestinian state amid ongoing conflict. In this context, the two-state solution would be almost impossible to achieve, said Daniel Levy.
I think we will see not only new legal vulnerabilities globally for Israel, new anger and boycotts, but also even new forms of resistance, all of which takes us to the question of two states. And I think the reality on the ground makes two states look very, very unlikely. If it's ever going to happen, Israel's cost-benefit calculation will have to look different, and Israel will have to offer something it has never offered, which is genuine ending of the occupation, genuine Palestinian sovereignty, and we're an awfully long way from that.
Nearly a year on, peace between the parties remain elusive, and the conflict continues to escalate, with Israeli ground operation against Hezbollah in Lebanon and ongoing exchanges of attacks, while Iran has launched over 150 ballistic missiles into Israel. Analysts warn that these developments have already triggered a wider regional conflict. The risk of renewed war and worsening regional conditions are real, leaving only hope for a return to stability in the Middle East. Baljan Samigulina, New Time.
The escalating conflict in the Middle East is pushing both sides further away from a ceasefire in Gaza and the achievement of the two-state solution, experts say. UN initiatives and global efforts, including those from Kazakhstan, to resolve the conflict have been overshadowed as the world anxiously watches the unfolding events. The death of the Hezbollah leader has been a major trigger for the escalation, analyst says. Dorian Isagulov spoke with experts to understand how the death of Hassan Nasrallah and the reaction of the parties are driving the region further away from peace and ceasefire in Gaza.
The death of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah after the missile strikes of Israeli forces has sent shockwaves around the world, raising fears of retaliation. With the war in Gaza already at a boiling point, there's a concern that the conflict could escalate if Iran, Israel's key rival in the Middle East, gets more directly involved. Tehran views Nasrallah's death as a major blow to its influence in Lebanon and the broader region. While Hezbollah is still in shock from the loss, the group is far from defeated, said Yersultan Janseidov, an expert from the Kazakhstan's Institute of World Economics and Politics.
There will be issues in Hezbollah for a short and medium period of time, because although Hezbollah was also decentralized in some level like Hamas, but Hassan Nasrallah was an important person. He was the decision maker. And we see that when he was assassinated, when he was killed, Hezbollah was in a little bit hesitation about its retaliation against Israel. But at the same time, it's just a matter of time. There will be another leader.
Hezbollah's military strength is unlikely to be weakened by Hassan Nasrallah's death. Therefore, a scenario where Hezbollah abandons armed conflict and seeks a ceasefire on Israel's terms seems highly unlikely.
The question of Hezbollah's capability there is a key one, because Hezbollah is the most powerful non-state actor in the world. 150,000 plus missiles and rockets, including some that are precision guided and ballistic long range. So this is a significant military actor.
How events will unfold largely depends on the actions of key players in the region. Military expert Paul Moorcraft from London's Centre for Policy Analysis added that after Nasrallah's death, the conflict could escalate in the coming weeks if Hezbollah deploys Iran's ultra-precise weapons.
This could be the trigger for a major conflict in the Middle East. What does that mean? That could be third intifada on the West Bank. It could be more fighting. The Saudis get sucked into what was called their Vietnam against the Houthis, possibly Syrians going into Golan. This could be a major war.
Experts noted that while the US may welcome the death of the leader of a group it deems terrorists, Washington and its allies are striving to prevent a larger war in the Middle East. Just hours before Iran's massive missile strike on Israel on October 1st, the British Foreign Minister reported ongoing talks with Iran.
We are speaking to Iranian colleagues and counterparts. I spoke to the Iranian Foreign Minister at the UN last week, and we are urging restraint. None of us want to see a regional war. The price would be huge for the Middle East, and it would have a significant effect on the global economy.
Despite the mutual accusations between Israel and Iran over the escalation, Kazakh analyst Jan Seyitov underlined that the fate of the region now lies in Israel's hands. Even though the Middle East is closer than ever to a full-scale war, he added, Iran's attack was mostly demonstrative, as it targeted military infrastructure in Tel Aviv.
So by this action, Iran is mostly showing its capabilities as if it's a sign that it could be worse for Israel. And Iranian government, the Ayatollahs, they are leaving the space of maneuver for Israel to retaliate in the same way without big devastation on the Iranian side, which could lead to a bigger war. So it depends on Israel right now, what will be the future of the region.
Nevertheless, Washington officially condemned Iran's missile strike, while Tel Aviv stated it has no intention of halting its military campaign. In this fog of war, the idea meant to resolve one of the longest-standing conflicts in the modern history, the Israel-Palestine conflict, continues to fade into the background. This refers to the two-state solution and the initiative for ceasefire in Gaza. The view is also shared by Iranian dissident and Middle East expert Ramin Parham, with whom we managed to speak.
The ceasefire in Gaza, as you just said, has simply been forgotten. I mean, the fate of the hostages, no one even talks about it anymore, not even the Israelis. Israel used to stage limited wars, and Israel used to win those limited wars in the past. But now we are facing a completely different solution, different situation. Israel has been at war for 12 months now. In a few days, it will be the anniversary of that disastrous day of October 7th. And it has been going on, and there is no outlook for peace.
According to Ramin Parham, the two-state solution is the only option that could extinguish the flames in the Middle East. To achieve lasting stability, countries in the region, including Iran and its entire political ideology, will need significant structural changes or reforms, Parham said.
And in my opinion, those changes won't come from bombing the country. Those changes won't come from outside. Those changes will come from an organic growth from within. There is also need to some extent, need for changes in Israel. That is, they have to change their mind. They have to change their mindset. they have to accept that there is only one solution to this conflict, and that is a two-state solution.
No Arab country, starting with Saudi Arabia, will fully normalize relations with Israel without such solution, the expert concluded. However, whether this will be achieved through force or diplomacy remains unknown. Meanwhile, the world holds its breath, awaiting the next phase of the Middle East conflict. Daurian Isagulov, Nurali Kudaibergenov, New Time.
In an observation of experts, foreign policy has rarely been a preoccupation for American voters, but they say the current U.S. administration's approach to events in the Middle East might change that in the 2024 presidential campaign. In an exclusive interview with New Time, Dr. Sahar Hamis, a professor of communication at the University of Maryland and president of the Arab-U.S. Association for Communication Educators, noted that U.S. policy regarding the crisis in Gaza and rising tensions with Iran likely won't dominate voters' priorities in November. However, the usual dynamics of foreign policy could be challenged in this campaign. Could the situation in the Middle East influence the positions of U.S. presidential candidates? Baljan Samigulina explored this topic.
It is a commonplace observation by analysts that American elections are not dedicated on foreign policy. As the Middle East spiraled towards full-scale war, the U.S. vice presidential debate held earlier this week between Democrat Tim Walz and Republican James David Vance focused largely on domestic issues. The presidential debate was the first and only one for the vice presidential nominees, and the final debate before Election Day with a little over a month to go. Commentators say compared to last month's clash between Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump, it was heavy on policy arguments and light on personal attacks. Notably, the VP debate opens with a question about the Middle East, which is now becoming a priority in the foreign policy.
I think you want to solve this problem. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this.
The crisis in the Middle East was brought during the first presidential debate held on September 10th between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. Yet, despite the heightened attention, both candidates adopted strikingly similar positions, battling over who has the most pro-Israel credentials, said Dr. Sahar Hamis, Associate Professor of Communication at the University of Maryland. However, in a strong close race, the Middle Eastern ambivalence could work against the presidential Democrat candidates in the House and the Senate and swing U.S. election for Trump, she added.
We have not seen this policy change, and many Arab Americans and Muslim Americans do not expect to see a policy change under a Harris administration. Definitely, the worsening of the situation in the Middle East is gonna affect the chances of both candidates, actually, the Republican and the Democratic, to get the Arab American and Muslim American vote. Who is it gonna hurt the most? I think it's gonna hurt Harris the most rather than Trump if she does not get these votes. And that might swing the election in the direction of Donald Trump, but it might be a very, very thin margin between both candidates.
Over the past month, the U.S. has seen visible protests over war in Gaza. Student movements in over 120 campuses, for instance, gained momentum driven by a sense of social justice and solidarity with Palestinians. Students have organized protest sit-ins and rallies to demand an end to the war and U.S. support for Israel military actions. Polling suggests that young progressive voters are more inclined to be critical on this issue and perhaps to question candidates' generally supportive stance. Even though there has been effective voice for young students across university campuses in the United States, they are not likely to follow the same or closer to that magnitude over the situations in Lebanon and Iran.
We haven't witnessed yet the momentum on campuses across the US and elsewhere regarding what is happening in Lebanon and what might actually happen in the region moving forward. There might be further escalations. That is expected, unfortunately, but we have not seen this student momentum build yet. I think that it's not going to be of the same magnitude. I expect that there may be some protests here and there on some US campuses that might very well be expected, but I don't expect that it's going to be with the same magnitude.
Thus, the foreign policy elite may debate the war in Gaza, and some may seek a different approach from Washington. But experts say among the electorate, the Democrats' administration policy will likely continue to enjoy broad support. Republican candidates will not find much exploit here too, but a lot may change between now and November 2024. Baljan Samigulina, New Time.
Meanwhile, Kazakh Foreign Ministry expressed deep concern over the escalating tensions in the Middle East. The ministry called on all parties to exercise restraint and avoid the use of force, emphasizing the need to protect civilian lives and prevent a potential full-scale war. Importantly, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs reported that as of today, there are no Kazakh citizens confirmed injured or killed in the region. However, Kazakhstan stands ready to arrange repatriation flights for any citizens needing assistance in the Middle East, said spokesperson of the ministry, Aybek Smadiyarov.
Several times, embassies have announced the necessity to leave the country due to the escalating military and political situation. The list of citizens registered with the consulate is being updated regularly. As of today, there are 120 citizens of Kazakhstan registered in Israel, 102 in Iran, and 139 in Lebanon.
And now to some other news topics. The Coordination Council of Partners for Water Sector Development was established in Kazakhstan. It includes representatives from the relevant ministry, the United Nations Development Programme, international organizations, financial institutions, donor communities, and other entities. The Council will focus on mobilizing and efficiently distributing financial and technical resources. It will also contribute to strengthening regional cooperation in water management. Kazakhstan has already concluded agreements with Central Asian countries regarding the use of waters from transboundary rivers and with Russia on their division.
We plan to launch the second phase of the Northern Aral Sea Preservation Project in partnership with the World Bank. Currently, the necessary documents are being prepared. We are also working with the Islamic Development Bank. In early September, we signed an interim protocol, and in October, we plan to sign the main agreement.
Kazakhstan's economy is demonstrating positive changes according to the International Monetary Fund. Forecasts indicate that the country's GDP growth in 2024 will be nearly 4%. The IMF also praised the measures to reduce inflation, which continues to decline, standing at 8.4% in August. Nicholas Blanchard, the head of the IMF mission for Kazakhstan, noted at a press conference in Astana that decisive reforms are necessary to achieve more ambitious goals.
We think elimination number of tax exemptions is important. Raising the value-added tax rate level is also important for us, and so we will look forward to those discussions which are going to happen in Parliament, and we will be supportive of the authorities in those areas to accelerate those reforms. Because, as you know, the tax code approval has been delayed to 2025.
On October 6, Kazakhstan will hold a nationwide referendum to decide the fate of what could potentially be the country's first nuclear power plant. Millions of Kazakh citizens will vote for or against the project. This practice isn't new on the global stage, as many countries, including Switzerland and Japan, have held votes on whether to adopt or reject nuclear energy. In Kazakhstan, a total of 177 observers representing 30 countries, including 4 major global organizations, have been officially registered. The chairpersons of the Central Election Commissions of Azerbaijan, Belarus, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan are also expected to arrive.
As of today, international organizations participating in the observation include the Commonwealth of Independent States, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Organization of Turkic States, and the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia.
Additionally, a number of foreign media outlets will also observe the referendum. A total of 200 journalists from 38 countries have been accredited so far. Moreover, 76 polling stations will be opened in over 60 countries on the referendum day for Kazakh citizens residing abroad. Due to the spread of viruses in the world, sanitary and epidemiological safety will be ensured at each polling station.
A total of 162 foreign journalists from 38 media outlets of 14 countries have been permanently accredited with the Kazakh Foreign Ministry. They have the right to observe the referendum. Additionally, 38 foreign journalists received temporary accreditation from the ministry specifically for the referendum.
And to wrap up with, the TV and radio complex of the President of Kazakhstan has produced a documentary titled Peaceful Atom, which delves into the secrets of nuclear energy from a scientific perspective. In the film, viewers will hear the stories of people living near nuclear power plants, meet leading scientists and get expert opinions on the operation of nuclear power plants around the world. The documentary also addresses key questions surrounding the potential construction of an NPP in Kazakhstan. The film is now available to watch on the official YouTube channel of the President's TV and radio complex. And that's it for today. All the main news about Kazakhstan and Central Asia you can find here. More special projects about our country you can also watch on Silkway TV channel. So stay tuned and see you next time.